So I need to get myself one of those, micro mobility, one of those electric scooters and zoom around.
That sounds scary.
Especially Miriam.
Yeah. I envision myself on one of those electric scooters with like a baguette and a big hunk of cheese in my front, this is the fantasy. Unfortunately, the reality is me getting hit by a car, laying on the side of the road. Haven't dropped my latte, though.
And that, my friends, is a win.
Welcome to Connections with BCD Travel, an ongoing conversation about the modern-day travel program, the impact of technology and digitization, and how travel buyers can take control and drive change. Each episode leaves you with practical, actionable advice and solutions to support a variety of program needs. Let's start connecting.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Miriam Moskovich, and I'm one of your hosts here on the Connections with BCD Travel podcast.
And I'm Chad Littman. Are you enjoying the Connections podcast? If so, be sure to leave us a review wherever you listen to Connections. Miriam, today's topic is a big one with a lot of chatter and even some polarizing conversations. So I'm looking forward to asking our guests some candid questions and getting some straightforward answers.
Same. Today's guest is Olivia Ruggles-Brise, BCD's new VP of Sustainability. Olivia, welcome to Connections. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Miriam and Chad. It's great to be here. So I joined BCD Travel about 6 months ago to head up all things sustainability within the organisation. I'm really excited to be here, and there's lots of work to be done.
I'm glad you're here. We're really looking forward to cutting through some of the fluff and greenwashed marketing and hearing how BCD tackles sustainability. So are you ready?
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Olivia, this is such a huge topic, so let's start off by establishing our baseline. What is BCD's stance on sustainability as it relates to corporate travel?
So sustainability is really important to us at BCD. In fact, it's part of our company vision statement. And as far as corporate travel is concerned, that we really believe that corporate travel is a force for good. And in fact, it accounts for around a quarter of the total economic contribution of travel and tourism around the world. So it's really important to society as well. But in a world where there are social and environmental concerns that are becoming more important, we really feel it's incumbent on the industry to make sure that we work to really maximize the positive impacts and minimize the negative impacts. So we really see this as core to what we do.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Most everyone I talk to has some sort of concern for the environment, but profit margins matter to companies and travel programs. And then there's the issue of ESG pushback. So how can sustainability fit into modern companies? Can it be a real thing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Miriam. So ESG, which stands for environmental, social and governance, is all about identifying and mitigating the environmental, social and governance risks for a particular company. So the way I see it, if companies don't want to pay attention to those risks or don't feel they're material to their operations, then that's their prerogative. But when it comes to the profit margin side of things, yeah, it is a real challenge, actually, it's particularly in our industry where we are just sort of recovering from the pandemic and we had a really tough time. But it's not always that the more sustainable option is the most expensive option. And in fact, quite often it can be the opposite. So there's lots of things to take into consideration. There's also the overlap with wellness. So, the obvious thing that everybody talks about is that direct flights are more environmentally sustainable than indirect flights. Well, they are in most parts of the world, but also that's the best option from a wellness perspective too. So these things kind of go hand in hand. But the other thing to think about is that quite often things are cheap for a reason. That's usually because they're not taking into account the real cost of what they are, and particularly the environmental cost. So if we look to the future, by all indications, we will have to start paying for those costs, whether it's increased cost of resources or inputs or even taxes. So really, if you want to get ahead of the game, you need to start looking at how you can reduce your emissions now so that you're in a better place when those costs start kicking in.
Olivia, when we say sustainability in business travel, are we just talking about carbon and emissions? I mean, sustainability is more than that, right?
Yeah, Chad, it definitely is. And I think, carbon is in the limelight at the moment, but you can't really look at that in isolation. If we look at how things have evolved over time, there's a big hoo-ha about plastics a while ago, and that's still important, but
Right.
it was all about the turtles. Now it's about carbon. What we'll see in the future is much more focus on nature and biodiversity. And of course, the social elements are really important too. People and nature and the environment are all part of one system. So when you look at things like community engagement, community empowerment, benefits, quality jobs, diversity, equity, inclusion, this all is part of the same thing. And again, supply chain as well. So when you look at the products that you buy and the impacts that they have, that's a really key part of sustainability. And if you just focus on one of those, you have a high risk of actually solving one problem and creating another.
Olivia, do you think that business travel can truthfully ever be sustainable?
Well, the way I see it, sustainability isn't a binary. It's not sustainable or not sustainable. It's actually a kind of trajectory. And so I think that there's very few things in this world that actually are fully sustainable, whatever that may mean. But what's truly the case is that business travel can be more sustainable, and there's a lot of work being done to try and kind of push us along that journey. But the other thing that's really important to remember with business travel is that given the complexity of the ecosystem, the nature of the structure of the industry that we work in, business travel can actually drive change. It can move markets when it comes to sustainability. And there's a really lovely example of this. About 10 years ago, the hotel companies got together to work together to agree on a standard methodology for measuring the carbon footprint of a room night. And before this, it was a complete mess. Everybody was doing it differently. And what drove this was the RFPs from the corporate travel.
Right.
So, there really is an opportunity here for business travel to take a lead. And I think that's the exciting part.
So let's switch gears here. How, or maybe the better question is, why is BCD Travel a good sustainability partner? What are we doing?
So there is a long history of sustainability at BCD Travel. For over 10 years now, we've had a program of certifying our office locations with ISO certifications, so environmental, health and safety certifications. So we were the first travel management company to have a science-based target that was validated last year. And that means that we have a carbon reduction goal that is in line with the requirements of science. We have a platinum EcoVadis, which means we're in the top 1% of companies that submit to that.
Wow.
But we also take a holistic view on sustainability, as we were talking about before. So we have really active DE&I, diversity, equity and inclusion program, and include within our sustainability thinking how we engage with our employees as well to make BCD a really good place to work. And then the other thing which is worth mentioning is that we, for many years now, have had our Make a Difference initiative, where staff members from around the world can identify charities local to them, which focus on children and education. And via our foundation, the John and Maureen van Vlissingen Foundation, we donate sums of money to those organizations each year. And that's a fantastic program. This year, I think we're supporting over 40 charities in 32 countries or something like that. So we really are a good, sustainable partner.
Yeah, that's really great to hear all of those examples. How can travel managers engage with us on sustainability? What can they do?
So the first thing to do, if you haven't done already, is to look at the carbon emissions data that's available on the Decision Source platform. You can kind of see where you're at now. Data goes back to 2019, so you can benchmark against 2019. We all know 2020 and 2021 weren't really representative years when it came to travel. So that's the first thing to do. The second thing is to try and seek out the person in charge of sustainability within your company, because they will probably have their own program, their own goals, and you need to make sure that whatever you do is going to be in alignment with that. And it's worth remembering that for some companies, business travel is a very big part of their emissions footprint. For others, it's a much smaller part. So it's about understanding where you fit within that whole, and then how you can use that to focus on a program going forward. And then it's really important to start talking to travelers about what they can do. What are the small things they can do, the decisions they can make that are within the policy, but which will help the travel be more sustainable. So, things like going for newer aircraft or direct flights, or even using trains where appropriate, you can start just nudging behavior and raising awareness quite easily. And then the other thing to remember, a lot of people get overwhelmed by sustainability. It's a big topic, big ambitions, very challenging. Actually, you don't need to do it all at once. The trick is to take small steps and just get started on the journey.
In a more tactical sense, do you see corporate travel programs looking at changing any of their travel policies to support sustainability more effectively than in the past?
I think some of the more advanced ones are looking at that, but it's certainly not commonplace.
Talk a little bit about goal setting. How can travel managers set impactful goals while still being realistic?
So the first thing, as I mentioned before, is to align with the wider company goals. So make sure that you understand what they are and how travel can fit into that. And then, as with setting any kind of goal, whether it's budget or performance, is start with a baseline measurement. So take a look at what your current status is and where you want to be, and then you can start putting in a plan as to how to achieve that. And this would be a more company-wide thing, but you could look at aligning with something like the Science-Based Targets Initiative so that you can have a validation for your target.
Olivia, I want to ask you about some buzz topics that we keep hearing about in business travel. And the first is sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. So what's your take on that?
So, yeah, there's a lot of noise about SAF, particularly at the moment, with some big announcements having just come out, and many of the airlines are investing very heavily in SAF. It's clearly not a silver bullet, but it's the only viable solution that we have at the moment. That's ready to come on stream, now. It's vital to remember that not all SAF is equal. Some of it comes from very good sustainable sources, but other can be quite questionable. So if you're looking at investing in SAF, you've really got to do your due diligence on where that SAF is coming from. It's definitely worth engaging with, but don't think it's going to solve all the problems. You really got to look at a more holistic approach as well.
And what about offsetting? Is that really worth it? I'm sure you saw that report that came out recently that said carbon offsetting is basically useless.
Yeah, I love that. Basically useless. Carbon offsetting has always been controversial. I think that it is becoming more and more problematic. While that particular article, which was published by The Guardian, there are some questions around the methodology behind that. It's really clear that there are significant problems with how carbon offsets are measured and reported, and the impact that they actually have. So I think that you need to be really careful before you go down the offsetting route. In any case, that has to be a last resort. Once you have reduced your emissions as much as you possibly can, then perhaps you can start thinking about offsetting. But the other thing which is happening now is that there are huge concerns around greenwashing, particularly in Europe. There's actually legislation coming in to cover greenwashing. And what that legislation is saying is that using terms like carbon neutral will no longer be acceptable unless you can absolutely prove the robustness of what goes behind that. So, even if you want to purchase offsets so you can have a claim to be carbon neutral, you're going to have to be really careful about what's going into it. And I think that, the other thing to remember is that if you want to start compensating for your emissions, that is absolutely fine. But think about how you do it, and there are other ways you can invest your money that's not in offsets that can be more effective. So one example, which I love, is investing in conservation of whales, for example. So each whale, when it dies, basically sinks to the bottom of the ocean and sequesters about 33 tons of carbon. And that is the equivalent of about 15 return trips from London to New York. So, there's good things you can do, but you might not get that kind of like for like that certificate, but you can do good things with your money. So think about it like that. Think about investing rather than offsetting.
Our friends over at BCD Meeting and Events could probably talk about this at length, but transient business travel isn't the only place that sustainability is playing a role, right? We hear about conferences and meetings changing up their menu, for example, to be more sustainable, or some of their transport or logistics options to be more sustainable. Do you have anything to say about conferences, groups, meetings in this place?
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity for sustainability within conferences and meetings. And I think that, one of the challenges with business travel is it's all about how you get to a location. You stay for not very long and then you get back again. Whereas there's a real opportunity with meetings and events where you stay for a certain amount of time, where you have a body of individuals together, and you can actually make some positive impact. So there's a lot of great stuff going on in the event space at the moment. Waste is one of the key things. So
right.
One of the biggest challenges that events have is the amount of materials that are constructed or brought in specifically for the event, which are then just wasted. And the nature of events being short term and unique means that that's a huge challenge. So, there's a lot of work to be done there, and some really good solutions coming on with sustainable exhibition stands and that kind of thing. And food is a big thing as well, and reducing the amount of meat that you eat, and you can do that in your day-to-day life, not just when you're traveling for an event. So a lot going on there.
You mentioned earlier what BCD is doing to be the best sustainable travel partner and goal setting. So can you talk a little bit about how our technologies help travel programs meet their goals?
Yeah, sure. We've got a number of features that can really support you with your sustainability goals. The first I've already mentioned is Decision Source. So we have data on there for carbon emissions of flights, hotels, rail and car. So you can really dig into that data and understand better where you are and where you want to be. That's the first thing. Then on our TripSource and AgentSource desktop platforms, we're going to be rolling out some new features at the end of this year, which will allow travelers to make sustainability decisions at the point of sale. So which flight is the most carbon efficient and that kind of thing. So that's really exciting. And then something else which we're really excited about is the integration of the train line. Towards the end of this year. And that will be a huge game changer, particularly in Europe. So it will allow the integration of booking of train journeys as well. And then in our marketplace, we have a section for sustainability, and we have a number of partners on there which can help you with all kinds of different elements of your sustainability work, measuring, offsetting if that's what you choose to do, purchasing SAF, and we'll have a lot more coming on in the rest of the year. So be on the lookout for that. And then finally, our colleagues at Advito have a really, really excellent sustainable collaboration practice. And if you want to talk to them, they can help you with very sophisticated data analytics, traveler engagement, and really how you can drive sustainability through your program. And if you want to find out more, then there is a hot take on sustainability by Advito, which is part of this Connections podcast.
Olivia, we always like to end this segment asking for a list of things that our listeners can do right now to move their travel program forward. So what are your suggestions to travel managers about sustainability today?
So I think there's three things I would recommend. First thing is look at the data, look at the data, look at the data. Well, that's actually three things in itself, but look at the data. And then the second thing is talk to your program manager. They can advise you on some of the features you can use and how you can implement that. And then the final thing is to start raising awareness with your travelers on the opportunities there are for sustainable decision making. So simple messages throughout the journey that can help raise awareness.
Well, we tackled a very big topic on this episode, so let's do a quick connect to have a little bit of fun. You both know the drill. I'll ask a question, and without thinking, tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Let's do it.
All right. If you could be any animal, what would you be and why?
I would be an elephant, because I would love to spend my days roaming around the plains of Africa with my herd.
Oh, beautiful.
I would be a squirrel, and I'd be sitting at my back door waiting for a peanut.
I feel like that was good, Miriam. I feel like I want to say, an eagle so I could just fly around, but in all honesty, probably a koala so I could sleep for 20 hours a day, wake up, eat a little bit, and go back to sleep.
And roll around.
Yes. Okay, everyone has a favorite travel destination, but what's the most beautiful or natural spot that you've ever been to?
Oh, this is really hard. I've been to too many places. I think my favorite, most beautiful place would have to be Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, which is just mind-blowing.
If you are in Seattle in the U.S. and you head west out to the Pacific Ocean, the 101 highway will take you next to this lake called Lake Crescent. You come down the side of a mountain and you kind of turn right into this lake, and there's nothing around. There's no anything. It's just this road, nature, and it is breathtakingly beautiful. I think about it all the time.
Mine would have to probably be Israel. Whether it's Jerusalem and being able to walk the streets of many people back in history, right? Or driving up to Haifa and seeing the sunset on the beautiful mountains. It looks golden up there. So it's surrounded by ocean. It's really beautiful.
Olivia, this was great, and we are so excited that you are part of BCD now and leading our sustainable efforts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I thought that was a great discussion, and I hope we can have you back again, Olivia, and we can keep talking about this really important topic.
Yeah, well, thank you both for having me. It's been great.
If you're a travel buyer, frequent business traveler, or just someone who likes hearing about sustainability, be sure to download and follow the Connections with BCD Travel podcast to stay up to date with new releases and listen to your favorite episodes.
Thank you for connecting with us. BCD Travel helps customers travel smart and achieve more. We make this happen in over 100 countries with a global client retention rate of 97%, the highest in the industry. Learn more about the information you heard today and what BCD Travel can do for you by visiting bcdtravel.com/podcast.